So today's video, we're going to wrap up chapter 1 with this last little bit here of chapter 1. Some of this will be freshman year review, some homeostasis feedback loops. So we're going to start here with levels of organization. Okay, so our levels of organization, you guys know this, you're familiar with this. Okay, these are our atom, right? Starting at the very small, tiny little atom, like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. And then we combine those into molecules, water, DNA, right? DNA is made of nucleotides, phosphate groups, sugars, which are made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen bases. So we combine those into molecules. From there, we go to the cell, right? So we're looking at atom, right, to molecule. From a molecule, we move to a cell. A cell is our smallest unit of living things. Okay, so molecules, atoms are not considered living. They can't do living processes. From a cell, we go to a tissue. Tissues are groups of cells that are working together with a similar function. So in this example here, we had a muscle cell, and then we put a bunch of muscle cells together to make up some smooth muscle tissue. From a tissue, we are going to head to an organ. An organ is a group of tissues working together. So my organ here is the stomach, and I have epithelial tissue, and then I have muscle tissue working together to form this organ. Remember, tissues are groups of cells that work together with a similar function. Organs are groups of tissues. From the organ, we're going to go to the system, which would be groups of organs working together. So now I have my whole digestive system. So liver, esophagus, small intestine, large intestine, that kind of thing. And then from our system, we put a whole bunch of systems together and we get our actual organism. You can see the little girl here in this picture. So there's digestive system, respiratory system, reproductive system, nervous system. Okay, so you guys want to make sure you know those in order, right? From atom and molecule to cell, tissue, organ, system, organism. Okay, so let's talk homeostasis for a few minutes. So a lot of you know homeostasis as balance, right? Homeostasis is really maintenance, right? We're maintaining certain internal constants, right? An easy example of this is going to be temperature, right? Our body likes a nice steady temperature, right? Sometimes we get too hot, and if we do, we try to bring it back down. We get too cold, we try to bring it back up. We like to stay right here at this nice steady temperature. So that's what homeostasis is trying to maintain these internal constants. We're doing them with temperature, with blood pH levels, blood gas levels, mineral balances, calcium levels. All of those are examples of things that we would try to keep relatively constant and maintain in homeostasis. Okay, we reach what we call dynamic equilibrium while we are trying to maintain homeostasis. Dynamic equilibrium is this right here. Okay, this constant, you can see it in the picture down here, right? This constant fluctuation, knowing that we don't keep the exact same temperature all the time. Sometimes we get too hot, sometimes we get too cold. Same with blood sugar, right? We eat a Snickers bar, it goes up too high. Then we haven't eaten for 5 hours and it drops down too low. Okay, but our body has an acceptable range that it can fluctuate in, and that's that dynamic equilibrium. And once we get up and out of that range, then we start to get concerned that disease could be happening. Okay, so homeostasis is maintaining this dynamic equilibrium, trying to keep these constants the best we can. All of our homeostatic mechanisms or our feedback systems have 3 basic parts. They're going to have the receptor, and the receptor is what's going to receive the information or the stimulus. So the receptor is receiving the information or the stimulus. Okay, and then the control center, which is also called the integration center. So the control center or the integration center, that is going to process that information. So it's going to analyze the information that comes into the receptor. So the receptor receives all the information. It does not do anything with that information. It just takes that information, sends it to the control center. The control center, the brain or the spinal cord, processes all that information, makes a decision, and then gives that decision to the effector. And then the effector is who actually is going to take action. And in our body, as a general rule, that is going to be some form of muscle or gland. So again, the receptor is receiving the information, control center is processing the information and making the decisions, and then the effector is actually going to do the action or the response. So let's look at this example of this happening here in our house, right? Most of us have air conditioning in our house. So we're trying to maintain homeostasis, which would be our normal room temperature. The stimulus here, or the signal, is going to be the room temperature rising. My receptor is the thermometer. So the thermometer is constantly measuring the temperature of the room. The thermometer is the device that measures the temperature. That measurement is then sent to the control center, which is the thermostat, that thing on the wall, right? So the measurement is sent to the thermostat, the control center. The control center takes that measurement, decides the room is too hot. So now it sends the command out to the effector, which would be the air conditioner. And so the air conditioner will turn on so we can get a response of cooling the room back down. And you can see how that would happen on our graph here, right? The room temperature goes up, right? The information is processed. The decision is made to try to bring it back down. The air conditioner turns on and brings it back down. So we have two basic kinds of feedback. We have negative and positive. And negative is by far the most common. Okay? Negative feedback is going to be how the vast majority of our body is regulated. Okay? It's going to make our effector basically do the opposite of the stimulus. So this is what we just saw with the air conditioner. The room got too hot, so temperature went up. And so the response is to bring it back down. And you see the same thing in the wintertime. The temperature drops down. So the response is for the heater to bring the temperature back up. This is providing most of our long-term homeostatic control. That's important because a lot of people see the term negative feedback and they think that it's a bad thing. And it's not, right? Negative feedback is controlling almost everything in our body. It helps regulate body temperature. It helps with hormone regulation. Negative feedback is, this is what happens when you start sweating. This happens in blood sugar regulation. So in addition to hormone regulation, pretty much that anything that needs to be maintained, it's going to be maintained by negative feedback. And we can see this happening in the diagram over here, right? So the normal temperature is disturbed. Okay, and so in this case, it's rising. So our temperature went up. So there's our stimulus, an increase in temperature. The receptors in the skin and in the brain, they read that temperature. They send that information to the part of the brain that controls body temperature. Your brain says, the temperature right now is way too high. So let me try to bring it down. So it sends a command out to your sweat glands. Remember I told you glands were either going to be effectors or glands. Effectors would either be glands or muscles. So we send the information out to the sweat glands. The sweat glands start secreting sweat to help cool you down. Blood vessels, which are controlled by smooth muscle, they expand, which will also help cool you down. And so now the response is that our body temperature is going down. So our response is the opposite of the stimulus. Therefore, this is an example of negative feedback. Again, not a bad thing, negative in the sense that it does the opposite. Positive feedback is not as common in the human body because positive feedback encourages the change. So, for instance, if something increases, positive feedback makes it keep increasing. Okay, and so this actually increases disruption. This is not really a regulatory thing. We really only have two main examples of this in the human body: blood clotting and childbirth. Both things that we want to continue until the process is over. For example, in blood clotting, you have a wound, right? And the platelets start laying down. And the platelets actually secrete a chemical that attracts more platelets to the area. So you can get the clot to happen very quickly. Right? We don't do this normally because then we would develop blood clots in perfectly healthy cells. But when there is damage, we want the blood to stop leaking and we need to stop it quickly. The diagram over here is showing you positive feedback involving childbirth, the actual labor, the actual delivery of the child. So first, you've got the contractions in the uterus. So the contractions in the uterus push the baby down so it stretches on the cervix. So basically what all the rest of this diagram will tell you is that as the cervix stretches out, that sends information up to the control center, up to the brain, okay, that says it's time to let the baby out. And the response is actually for the muscles to contract more forcefully. So the initial stimulus was the muscle contraction, and the response is even more muscle contraction. So this is exacerbating or encouraging the change to keep happening, which is why it's an example of positive feedback. This encourages more contractions, which is more stretching, which then says, hey, even stronger contractions. This is working. Let's get this baby out. Okay, and our last thing here in chapter 1 is metabolism. Metabolism is just all of the chemical reactions that are happening in your body. Okay, so again, metabolism is all the chemical reactions happening in the body. It looks like my little pen is dying. Okay, and we have two basic kinds of chemical reactions. We have catabolism, which is going to break things down. And we have anabolism, which is going to build things back up. So you notice catabolism is going to be releasing energy. So this would be things like digestion, right? We take in the food, we break down the food into smaller units. Anabolism requires energy. This is when we build things up, when we rebuild the muscles, when we repair our skin, when we help grow new cells. Okay? And our metabolic rate is going to be the speed at which all these reactions are taking place. Right? So metabolism is just all the chemical reactions, both the building up and the breaking down ones, where the metabolic rate is going to be how fast your body does that. Basically, how fast do you consume energy, okay, and then produce ATP, which is usable energy. And that's going to depend upon a variety of things. Okay? Your genetics, your exercise level, your lean muscle mass. Okay? These are all things that can impact metabolism. One of the ways that helps me remember these two, okay, is catabolism is like a catastrophe. Not really, not in the sense that it's like a really terrible thing, but a catastrophe usually ends up destroying stuff, right? So catabolism, we break things down. Anabolism is a synthesis reaction, right? And so we're building things up. Okay, so that wraps up chapter 1 for us. So we will do some practice with this in class next time.